Grace Wheeler's knees hit the frozen ground, her hands raw and bleeding pressed together in front of the stone-faced rancher. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "My children haven't eaten in 3 days. I'll scrub your floors, mend your clothes. Anything. Just don't let my babies die in this cold." Behind her, 7 small figures huddled together. The youngest, barely 2, had stopped crying hours ago. That silence terrified her more than any words. The man's jaw tightened. His eyes swept over the ragged group. "Get off my land." Before we continue this story, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel and follow Grace's journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's return to Cedar Hollow, Wyoming, 1878. Grace Wheeler had learned many things in her 28 years. She'd learned to sew a straight seam by candlelight. She'd learned to stretch a pound of flour into a week's worth of bread. She'd learned to smile through hunger and sing through sorrow. But she had never learned how to beg. Until today. Her knees pressed into the half-frozen mud of Caleb Stone's property line. Behind her, 7 children stood in a silent row. The oldest 12-year-old Samuel held the youngest 2-year-old Hope against his chest. His arms were shaking. Whether from cold or exhaustion, Grace couldn't tell anymore. "Please," she said again. "I ain't asking for charity. I'll work. I'll work harder than any man you've hired. Just give us shelter for one night." Caleb Stone stood 6 feet above her, his frame blocking what little warmth the October sun offered. His jaw was set like granite. His eyes, gray as the sky before a storm, revealed nothing. "I said get off my land." "Mama." The small voice came from behind her. 6-year-old Lily had stepped forward, her hand reaching for Grace's shoulder. "Mama, I'm cold." Grace's heart cracked. She could feel it splitting right down the center. "I know, baby, I know." She turned back to the rancher. This man who owned 25 acres of good Wyoming land. This man with a warm house and a full barn. This man who could save her children with a single word. "We walked 18 miles today," Grace said. "The little ones can't walk no more. My boy Samuel's been carrying Hope since dawn. Please, Mr. Stone, I ain't asking for your food. I ain't asking for your bed. Just let us sleep in your barn. We'll be gone by sunrise." Something flickered in his eyes. For one breath, Grace thought she saw a crack in that stone wall. Then it closed. "Barn's not fit for people. It's fit enough for us. You got family somewhere. Go to them." Grace laughed. The sound was hollow, broken. "You think I'd be kneeling in dirt if I had family? My husband's dead. His kin took everything we had and threw us out. Said they couldn't feed 8 extra mouths. That ain't my problem." "No," Grace agreed. "It ain't. But I'm making it your problem because I got no other choice." She pushed herself up from the mud. Her knees screamed in protest. Her back ached from carrying 4-year-old Thomas for the last 3 miles. Grace Wheeler stood at her full height, 5 feet 5 inches of exhaustion, desperation, and something else. Something that burned beneath the weariness, like embers refusing to die. Pride. "I understand," she said, and her voice had changed. Harder now, steadier. "You're a man who keeps to himself. The whole territory knows it. Caleb Stone, they call you, cold as the name suggests." His eyes narrowed. "But I wonder," Grace continued, "what your mama would say. If she could see you right now, turning away a widow and her children in October cold." The words landed like a slap. Caleb's whole body went rigid. His hands, which had been loose at his sides, curled into fists. For a terrible moment, Grace thought he might strike her. Then he spoke, and his voice was ice. "You don't know nothing about my mama. I know she raised you. I know she fed you. I know she kept you warm when winter came." Grace took a step closer. "And I know that if she was anything like my mama, she'd be ashamed to see her son turn away hungry children. The silence stretched between them. Behind Grace, one of the younger children started to cry, 8-year-old Mary, who had been so brave all day. "Hush now, Mary," Samuel said softly. "It's gonna be all right." But it wasn't all right. Grace could see it in Caleb Stone's face. He wasn't going to bend. "Fine," she said. "We'll go." She turned to gather her children. Thomas reached for her hand. Lily pressed against her side. Samuel still held hope, though his arms were trembling visibly now. "Come on," Grace said. "We'll find somewhere else." "Where, Mama?" 10-year-old Ruth asked. Her eyes were too old for her face. "There ain't nowhere else. We tried every farm between here and town." "Then we'll keep walking." "I can't." 9-year-old Daniel sat down heavily in the dirt. "Mama, I can't walk no more. My feet hurt too bad." Grace looked down at her son. His shoes, if you could still call them that, were held together with strips of cloth. She could see his toes through the holes. "Daniel, get up." "I can't." "You have to." "I can't, Mama. I'm sorry. I just can't." The other children were watching, waiting. Grace could feel their eyes on her, looking for guidance, for hope, for anything that might tell them they'd survive another night. She had nothing to give them. Nothing except the truth. "All right," she said quietly. "All right, we'll rest here a minute. Just a minute." She sank down beside Daniel, pulling him against her. Lily climbed into her lap without asking. Thomas pressed against her other side. The older children, Samuel, Ruth, Mary, formed a tight circle around them. Hope had fallen asleep in Samuel's arms. Or passed out. Grace wasn't sure which anymore. They sat there in the dirt of Caleb Stone's property line, 7 children and 1 mother huddled together like animals seeking warmth. Grace closed her eyes. "Lord," she prayed silently, "I don't know what else to do. I've tried everything. I've begged and bargained and worked my fingers raw. I've walked until my feet bled. I've given my children my last crumbs of food. I got nothing left. Nothing except them. And if you take them from me, if you let them freeze out here in this cold, then I don't want to live neither. So please, please, send us help." She opened her eyes. Caleb Stone was still standing there. He hadn't moved, hadn't gone back to his house. He just stood there watching them, his face unreadable. "What?" Grace asked. "Come to make sure we leave." He didn't answer. "Well, we're leaving. Soon as Daniel catches his breath, soon as I can get my legs working again. We'll be out of your sight, Mr. Stone. Don't you worry." Still nothing. Grace felt anger rise in her chest, hot and sudden. "What kind of man are you? Standing there watching children suffer. You got a heart in that chest, or just a lump of coal?" "You don't know nothing about me," he said again. But this time his voice was different, rougher around the edges. "I know enough. I know you got a warm barn and won't share it. I know you got food enough for 1 man and won't spare a scrap. I know you'd rather watch babies shiver than open your door. I didn't ask for you to come here. No, you didn't. Life don't ask us much of anything, does it? Didn't ask me if I wanted to bury my husband. Didn't ask my children if they wanted to lose their daddy. Didn't ask any of us if we wanted to walk 18 miles on empty stomachs." Grace pulled Lily closer. "But here we are. And here you are. And you get to choose, Mr. Stone. You get to choose what kind of man you're gonna be." He flinched. It was small, barely visible, but Grace saw it. Something in her words had found a crack in that stone wall. Before she could say anything else, a new voice cut through the cold air. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Grace turned. A wagon had stopped on the road behind them. A woman sat in the driver's seat, her back straight as a poker, her face pinched with disapproval. Her dress was black silk, expensive, city-made, and her gray hair was pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her skin. "Mrs. Hargrove," Caleb said. The warmth drained from his voice entirely. "This ain't your concern." "Everything in Cedar Hollow is my concern, Mr. Stone. My husband is the mayor after all." The woman's eyes swept over Grace and the children like she was examining livestock at auction. "And what manner of creature is this begging at decent folks' property like common vagrants?" Grace's jaw tightened. "We ain't vagrants, ma'am. We're travelers, just looking for work and a place to rest." "Travelers?" Ruth Hargrove laughed a cold, brittle sound. "Is that what they're calling it now? In my day, we had a different word for women who wandered the countryside with a pack of children. Several words, in fact. None of them fit for polite company." "That's enough." The words came from Caleb. His voice had gone flat and hard. Mrs. Hargrove's eyebrows rose. "Defending her? Are you, my? She must have made quite an impression. Tell me, dear." She turned back to Grace. "What services exactly were you offering Mr. Stone in exchange for his hospitality?" Grace felt her children shrink against her. They didn't understand the words, but they understood the tone, the cruelty behind it. "I offered to work," Grace said. "Hard work, honest work. That's all." "Of course you did." Mrs. Hargrove's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And I'm sure Mr. Stone was about to accept. He always was soft-hearted about strays, never could turn away a wounded animal." She paused. "Though I must say I've never seen him take in quite so many at once. 7 children. Goodness, you've been busy, haven't you?" "They're my children," Grace said. "My husband's children, born in lawful marriage, baptized in the church at Lawrence, Kansas. If you've got something else to say about them, say it plain." The smile froze on Mrs. Hargrove's face. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by women in muddy dresses with dirt on their knees. "I don't think I like your tone." "I don't think I like yours neither, but here we are." For a long moment, the two women stared at each other. Then Mrs. Hargrove gathered her reins. "Mr. Stone," she said, not looking at Grace anymore. "I do hope you'll remember your reputation. This territory has enough scandal without you adding to it." She clicked her tongue at the horses. "Good day." The wagon rolled away, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. Grace watched it go. Her hands were shaking. From cold, from anger, from the awful knowledge that Mrs. Hargrove would spread this story through town before nightfall. By tomorrow, Grace Wheeler would be known as something she wasn't, and there was nothing she could do about it. "Mama," Lily's voice was small. "Why was that lady so mean?" Grace stroked her daughter's hair. "Some folks just are baby. Ain't no explaining it. I don't like her." "You don't have to like her. She talked about you like you was bad." "I know. But you ain't bad." "No," Grace said. "I ain't." She kissed the top of Lily's head, then looked up at Caleb Stone. He was staring after the wagon, and his expression had changed. The coldness was still there, but now it was aimed elsewhere. At the dust trail Mrs. Hargrove had left behind. "That woman," Grace said quietly, "she got power in this town. Her husband's the mayor. And she don't like you much." Caleb's jaw worked. "She don't like anybody much. But you especially." He didn't answer, didn't need to. Grace could read it in the tension of his shoulders, the way his hands had curled at his sides during the whole conversation. There was history there, bad history. "If we stay," Grace said slowly, "even one night it'll give her ammunition against you. Won't it?" Caleb finally looked at her, really looked, and for the first time Grace saw something besides stone in his eyes. Surprise. "You're worried about my reputation," he said. "I'm worried about what she'll do to you if you help us." "Why?" Grace shrugged. "Because you were about to say yes, before she came. I could see it. You were fighting with yourself, but you were about to let us stay. And now," she gestured at the empty road, "now you got even more reason to send us away. But you're still standing here." He had no response to that. "We should go, Mama," Samuel said. He'd managed to shift hope in his arms, cradling her against his thin chest. "Before she comes back with more people." Sam's right, Ruth added. She'd always been the practical one. If the whole town turns against us, nobody'll give us work. We'll starve faster than if we just kept walking. Grace nodded slowly. You're right. Both of you. She began gathering the younger children. Come on. Thomas, take Mary's hand. Daniel, can you walk now? I'll try, Mama. That's my brave boy. She got them arranged. Lily on her hip, Thomas holding Mary's hand, Daniel limping beside Ruth, Samuel still carrying Hope. They looked like a sad little parade, refugees from a war nobody could see. Grace took one last look at Caleb Stone. Thank you, she said. His brow furrowed. For what? I didn't do nothing. No, you didn't, but you thought about it, and that's more than most have given us in a long time. She turned to lead her children away. Wait! The word was rough, almost forced, like it had been dragged out of him against his will. Grace stopped, turned. Caleb stood there, his hat in his hands, now turning it by the brim. He wouldn't meet her eyes. The barn, he said. It ain't fit for people. Drafty, cold at night, mice in the corners. We've slept worse. I know, he swallowed. But the house has got a stove. And beds. 2 of them anyway. Floors wooden, warmer than dirt. Grace's heart stopped. What are you saying? He finally looked up. His eyes were storm clouds. Conflict raged behind them, pride and compassion, fighting a war. I'm saying... He put his hat back on, pulling it low. I'm saying the house is big enough. For a night, just one night. You'll be gone by morning. Mr. Stone, don't. He cut her off. Don't thank me. Don't say nothing about it. Just get your children inside before they freeze. Grace opened her mouth to speak anyway. Then she saw Lily's face, the hope blooming there. The desperate, fragile hope of a child who'd forgotten what warmth felt like. Children, Grace said, her voice barely steady. Follow Mr. Stone. They walked up the dirt path to the house, a simple structure of weathered wood and stone chimney. Nothing fancy, but solid. Real. The kind of house that could keep winter out. Caleb opened the door. Warmth rushed over them like a blessing. Inside, a fire burned in the iron stove. The light flickered across wooden walls, a worn table, 2 chairs, a shelf of dishes, a small kitchen. Through a doorway, Grace could see a bedroom. 1 bed quilt folded at the foot. It wasn't much. It was everything. Daniel, sit here by the stove, Grace directed. Mary, help him with his shoes. Thomas, you sit too. Samuel. She took Hope from his trembling arms. The baby stirred, but didn't wake. Ruth, find a blanket for the little ones. Lily. Mama. Lily was crying, tears streaming silently down her thin face. Mama, it's warm. Grace knelt down and gathered her daughter close. I know, baby. I know. She looked up at Caleb Stone, who stood in the doorway of his own home, watching these strangers fill up the spaces that had been empty for so long. One night, he said. One night, Grace agreed. But something had changed. In his eyes, in hers. Neither of them could name it yet. But it was there, the first crack in the stone. Grace woke to the smell of coffee. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't open her eyes. The scent was so foreign now, so distant from the life she'd been living, that she thought she must be dreaming. Then hope stirred against her chest, and Grace remembered. The house, the stove, Caleb Stone. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake the children piled around her on the floor. They'd made a nest of every blanket in the house, all 7 of them pressed together like puppies seeking warmth. Samuel's arm was thrown over Daniel. Lily had curled into a ball against Mary's back. Ruth slept with Thomas tucked under her chin, and Hope had somehow ended up in Grace's arms sometime during the night. The fire in the stove had burned low. Gray morning light seeped through the windows, and somewhere beyond the main room she heard movement. Grace extracted herself from the tangle of children and stood. Her whole body ached. 18 miles of walking didn't disappear with one night's sleep, but the pain felt different now. Manageable. Survivable. She followed the smell of coffee to the small kitchen. Caleb Stone stood with his back to her, pouring dark liquid into a tin cup. He wore the same clothes as yesterday, though his hat hung on a peg by the door. Without it, she could see his hair, dark brown, longer than was fashionable, curling slightly at the collar. "Didn't mean to wake you," he said without turning around. "You didn't. Hope did." "The baby." "She's 2, gets hungry early." Caleb nodded. He still hadn't looked at her. "There's bread in the box there, butter in the crock. Ain't much, but it's more than we had." Grace moved to the bread box and lifted the lid. Inside sat half a loaf, day-old but soft enough. Her mouth watered so suddenly it hurt. "Go on," Caleb said. "Take it. All of it. I got more flour, can make another." Grace's hands trembled as she lifted the bread. She wanted to tear into it right there, stuff her mouth full, swallow without chewing. Instead, she set it carefully on the table. "I'll divide it proper when the children wake. They can have the eggs too." Caleb finally turned around. His eyes swept over her once, quick assessing, then looked away. "Chickens laid 6 this morning. Should be enough. 6 eggs. 7 children." "I don't need to eat," Grace said automatically. "When's the last time you did?" She didn't answer. "That's what I thought." He pushed a cup of coffee toward her. "Drink this, then eat something. You ain't no good to them children if you collapse." The first sip of coffee burned her tongue. Grace didn't care. She drank it down like medicine, feeling the warmth spread through her chest, her stomach, her limbs. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I told you not to thank me. And I told you I keep my word. But some things got to be said anyway." They stood in silence for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside, a rooster crowed. "You should know," Caleb said finally. "Mrs. Hargrove will have talked by now. Whole town probably knows you're here. I figured. They'll have questions, suspicions. Let them. Easy for you to say. You ain't got to live here after you're gone." Grace set down her cup. "You want us to leave? We'll leave. You gave us one night. That was the deal." "I ain't saying that." "Then what are you saying?" Caleb rubbed a hand over his face. He looked tired, deeply tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "I'm saying I got a choice to make, and I ain't sure which way to go." "What choice?" Before he could answer, a small voice came from the doorway. "Mama!" Grace turned. Lily stood there rubbing her eyes, her hair a tangled mess around her face. "Morning, baby." "I smell something good?" "Mr. Stone made coffee, and there's bread for breakfast." Lily's eyes went wide. "Real bread. Real bread." The child's face transformed. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy broke across her features like sunrise. "Can I have some now? Please, Mama, I'm so hungry." Grace looked at Caleb. He nodded once. "Go on," he said gruffly. "Wake the others. I'll fry the eggs." Lily ran back to the main room, her bare feet slapping against the wooden floor. Grace heard her excited whispers, heard the other children stirring, heard Daniel groan, and Ruth shush him. "You don't have to do this," Grace said quietly. Caleb was already reaching for the eggs. "Reckon I know what I have to do and what I don't." "This ain't your burden." "No." He cracked an egg into the pan. "It ain't. But them children didn't ask for none of this neither. Don't seem right to punish them for their mama's situation." Something in his words stung. Grace felt her spine stiffen. "My situation," she repeated. "You mean being a widow, being poor, walking 18 miles because my husband's family threw us out like garbage. I didn't mean, or maybe you mean the situation of having 7 children, of loving a man who died and left me with nothing but mouths to feed and no way to feed them. Caleb turned from the stove. His eyes met hers, and for the first time Grace saw something other than stone there. Something that might have been respect. "I meant no offense." "None taken." Grace's voice was still hard. "But let's be clear about something, Mr. Stone. I ain't ashamed of my situation. I'm ashamed of the world that made it so hard. I'm ashamed of people who look at a widow and see scandal instead of survival. I'm ashamed of—" She stopped herself, took a breath. "Forgive me. I got no right to lecture you in your own kitchen." "No," Caleb said slowly. "I reckon you got every right." The children spilled into the kitchen, then stopping the conversation. 7 hungry faces, 7 pairs of hopeful eyes, all fixed on the bread and the eggs and the promise of food. Grace divided the bread carefully, larger pieces for the older children, smaller for the little ones. Nothing for herself, despite Caleb's earlier words. She watched them eat, watched the color return to their cheeks, watched Lily lick butter off her fingers with pure bliss. This, she thought. This is why I kept walking. This moment, right here. "Mama, aren't you eating?" Samuel asked. At 12, he was almost a man, or would be if hunger and hardship hadn't kept him small. His eyes were too sharp, too knowing. "I ate already," Grace lied. "No, you didn't." "Sam? I was awake. I saw you come in here. You ain't had nothing but coffee." Caleb was watching her. Grace could feel his gaze without looking. "Here." He pushed a plate toward her. 2 eggs fried crisp at the edges, a slice of bread. "Sit down and eat." "The children?" "Got plenty. You heard your boy. Sit." Grace sat. The first bite of egg nearly brought tears to her eyes. When had food ever tasted this good? When had anything? The children watched her eat with satisfaction, as if feeding their mother was as important as being fed themselves. "All right," Caleb said when the plates were clean. "Here's how it's going to be." Everyone went still. "You can stay another day. Maybe 2. Until you figure out where you're headed and how you're getting there." "Mr. Stone," Grace started. "I ain't finished." He held up a hand. "In exchange, I expect work. Real work. I got fences need mending, animals need tending, a barn that ain't been cleaned proper in months. Your older ones can help with that. The younger ones can stay out of trouble. And you," he looked at Grace, "can cook, if you're able." "I'm able." "Good. I've been eating my own cooking for 15 years. Could use a change." Despite everything, Grace almost smiled. "That bad?" "Worse." He stood reaching for his hat. "I'll be in the south field until noon. Samuel, was it?" Samuel straightened. "Yes, sir." "You know how to mend a fence?" "I can learn, sir." "Good enough. Come with me." Caleb paused at the door. "The rest of you mind your mama, and stay away from the well. It ain't covered proper." Then he was gone. Samuel hurrying after him, leaving Grace alone with 6 children and a kitchen full of dirty dishes. "Mama." Ruth stepped forward. At 10, she was the responsible one, the one who'd helped Grace hold things together when everything was falling apart. "What do we do now?" Grace looked around the kitchen. At the stove that needed scrubbing, at the floor that needed sweeping, at the windows that needed washing. "Now," she said, "we earn our keep." The morning passed in a blur of work. Grace set Ruth and Mary to cleaning while she tackled the kitchen. Daniel, despite his sore feet, insisted on helping, so she gave him the task of organizing the pantry. Lily watched Thomas and Hope, keeping them entertained with stories and games, while the older children worked. By midday, the house was cleaner than it had been in years. Grace could see it in the way the sunlight fell differently through the windows, in the way the floor gleamed, in the way everything felt lighter, brighter. She was scrubbing the last pot when the door opened. Caleb stood in the entrance, Samuel behind him. Both were covered in dirt, sweat streaking through the dust on their faces. "Smells different in here," Caleb said. "I cleaned." "I noticed." He looked around the kitchen with an expression Grace couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe. Or something deeper. "Samuel here's a quick learner," he said finally. "Got the south fence done in half the time I expected." Samuel's chest puffed with pride. "Mr. Stone showed me how to set the posts proper, and how to twist the wire so it don't come loose." "That's good, Sam." Grace dried her hands on her apron, one of Caleb's old shirts repurposed for the task. "You hungry?" "Starving." "I made stew, from what I found in the pantry. Hope that's all right." Caleb moved to the stove and lifted the pot lid. Steam rose, carrying the scent of onions and potatoes, and the salt pork she'd found hanging in the cellar. "You made this." "Ain't much, but it's hot." He ladled a bowl without another word. The first spoonful stopped him mid-motion. He stood there, frozen the spoon halfway to his mouth. "Mr. Stone, is something wrong?" "No." His voice was rough. "Nothing's wrong. It's just—" He took another bite, then another. "My mama used to make stew like this. Same taste, same smell. I ain't had it since she passed." Grace felt her heart twist. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to—" "Don't apologize." He set the bowl down. "It's good. Real good. I just wasn't expecting it." The children gathered for their own bowls, slurping and sighing with satisfaction. Even Hope, who'd been fussy all morning, settled down once she got a taste of the broth. Grace ate last, as always. The stew was simple, nothing special, nothing fancy, but watching her children eat it, watching Caleb eat it, made it feel like a feast. "I need to go to town," Caleb said when the meal was finished. "Supplies. I'll be back before dark. Do you want company?" "No." The word came fast. Too fast. "Best if you stay here. Keep out of sight." "Because of Mrs. Hargrove." "Because of everyone." He pulled on his coat. "Town's not kind to strangers. Especially not—" He stopped. "Widows with 7 children," Grace finished. "I know. It ain't right, but it's how it is." "Lots of things ain't right, Mr. Stone. We learn to live with them anyway." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then, without another word, he left. The afternoon stretched long and quiet. Grace kept the children busy, more cleaning, more organizing a reading lesson for Lily, using an old almanac she'd found on Caleb's shelf. But her mind wouldn't settle. One more day, Caleb had said, maybe 2. And then what Oregon was still 1,000 miles away. Her sister's letters had been warm, but cautious room for 1, maybe 2, but 7 children. That was another matter entirely. Grace had no money, no prospects, no plan beyond putting one foot in front of the other and praying something would change. "Mama!" Lily tugged at her sleeve. "When are we going to Oregon?" "Soon, baby." "How soon?" "Soon as we can get the train fare." "Where are we going to get train fare?" Grace didn't have an answer to that. She pulled Lily close and kissed the top of her head. "Don't you worry about that. That's Mama's job. But I want to help." "You do help, every single day." "How?" Grace smiled. "By being you. By being brave and kind and strong. That's the best help there is." Lily considered this. "Mr. Stone is brave and kind and strong too, ain't he?" "What makes you say that?" "He looks mean, but he gave us eggs." "Sometimes the meanest-looking folks got the softest hearts." "Is his heart soft?" Grace thought about Caleb Stone. About the way he'd refused them, then relented. About the stew that reminded him of his mother. About the crack she'd seen in his stone wall. "I think," she said slowly, "his heart is softer than he knows." The sun was setting when Caleb returned. Grace heard the wagon before she saw it, the creak of wheels, the snort of horses, the heavy thud of supplies being unloaded. She went to the door. Caleb was lifting sacks of flour, bags of beans, crates of vegetables, more food than one man could eat in a month. "That's a lot of supplies," Grace said. "Winter's coming." "Still, that's enough to feed an army." He didn't look at her. "Maybe I'm expecting company." Grace's heart skipped. "What kind of company?" The kind that eats too much and talks too little. He hauled another crate. Help me with these, would you? They worked in silence, carrying supplies into the pantry. Grace's mind raced with questions she didn't dare ask. When the wagon was empty, Caleb finally spoke. Town was buzzing. About you. I figured it would be. Mrs. Hargrove's been busy. Told everyone you're a beggar woman, a fortune hunter. Said you showed up half naked on my doorstep. Half naked. Her words, not mine. Grace felt sick. And what did you say? Nothing. Caleb leaned against the wagon. Wasn't nobody asking my opinion. So you just let them talk. What was I supposed to do? Stand in the middle of the general store and defend a woman I barely know? The words hit harder than Grace expected. She stepped back. You're right. Why would you? We're just strangers passing through. That ain't what I meant. It's what you said. Caleb pulled off his hat, ran a hand through his hair. Look, I ain't good at this. Talking, explaining. I've been alone too long. Forgot how to what? How to be around people. He met her eyes. How to let them in. Grace felt the anger drain out of her. That makes two of us. You got 7 children. You're around people all the time. Being around people ain't the same as letting them in. Grace hugged herself against the cold. My children need me, but they don't know me. Not really. Not the parts that hurt. Not the parts that are scared. What parts are those? The question surprised her. No one had ever asked. The part that wakes up every night wondering if we'll survive tomorrow. Grace said quietly. The part that pretends to be strong when I'm falling apart inside. The part that... She stopped. The part that's so tired of being alone. Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then he said, After my mama died, I didn't speak to anyone for 3 months. Just worked. Sunrise to sunset. Didn't eat right. Didn't sleep right. Just worked until my body was so tired my mind couldn't think anymore. How old were you? 16. And your pa? Caleb's face went hard. My pa was the reason she died. Worked her to the bone. Never said a kind word. Never lifted a hand except to hurt. When she finally gave out, he just left. Didn't even stay for the burial. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not. He pushed off the wagon. Best thing he ever did was leave. Meant I didn't have to kill him myself. The words hung in the air, cold and honest. I used to think that about Thomas's family, Grace admitted. After they threw us out, I used to imagine them suffering, losing everything like we did, being cold and hungry and scared. Did it help? No, just made me feel ugly inside. That's why I stopped thinking about my pa. Caleb started toward the house. Anger's like poison. You think you're drinking it to hurt somebody else, but you're the one who dies. Grace followed him inside. The children had gathered by the stove waiting for supper. Their faces lit up when they saw the supplies Caleb had brought. Is that real sugar? Mary asked, pointing at one of the bags. It is. Can we have some? Maybe, if your mama says it's all right. 7 pairs of eyes turned to Grace. A little, she said, as a treat. The joy that erupted was worth more than gold. Supper that night was better than the night before. Fresh vegetables, proper seasoning, enough food that no one had to go hungry. Grace even managed to make a simple cake with the sugar and flour, the first sweet thing her children had tasted in months. This is the best day ever, Lily announced, her face smeared with crumbs. Better than Christmas? Thomas asked. Better than 10 Christmases. Caleb watched them from his place at the table. Grace caught him smiling just for a second, just a flash before his face returned to its usual stone. But she'd seen it. After the children were asleep, Grace sat by the stove mending one of Daniel's shirts. The house was quiet, peaceful in a way she'd almost forgotten. Caleb came in from outside, stamping mud off his boots. Storm's coming, he said. Big one. Could be days before the road's clear. Grace looked up. Days? Maybe a week. Maybe more. We can't stay here a week. You got somewhere else to be. The question wasn't cruel, just honest. No, Grace admitted. But we've already imposed enough. You ain't imposing. Caleb hung his coat by the door. You're helping. House ain't been this clean since I built it, and that stew. He shook his head. My mama would have approved. That means a lot. It's the truth. He sat across from her, his long legs stretched toward the stove. Can I ask you something? Depends on what. Your husband, Thomas, how'd he die? Grace's hands stilled on the shirt. Fever, 2 winters back. Started as a cold, turned into something worse. By the time we got the doctor, it was too late. Were you there? At the end. I was holding his hand. Grace resumed her sewing, the needle moving automatically. He made me promise to take care of the children, to keep them together no matter what, and he said... She paused. He said he was sorry, for leaving me, for leaving them. Good man. The best. Grace's voice caught. Not perfect. Lord knows he wasn't perfect. But he loved us, really loved us. And when he was gone, it felt like the sun went out. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then, I never had that. Never had someone who loved me like that. Your mama? She tried. But she was so worn down by the time I was born, so tired. I think she loved me best she could. But it wasn't enough to fill the hole my pa left. No one person can fill that hole, Grace said softly. I've learned that. The hole stays. You just learn to build around it. You're stronger than you look. I'm weaker than you think. No. Caleb's eyes met hers. You ain't. I've seen strong Mrs. Wheeler. And I've seen fake strong. You're the real thing. Grace felt heat rise to her cheeks. You don't know me well enough to say that. Maybe not. But I know what I see. She ducked her head, focused on the sewing. Her heart was beating too fast, her thoughts scattered like leaves in wind. This was dangerous. She knew it was dangerous. A widow with 7 children had no business feeling anything for a solitary rancher who'd shown them one night's kindness. But there it was, a warmth spreading through her chest, a hope she had no right to feel. The children like you, she said, steering toward safer ground. They like anybody who feeds them. No, it's more than that. Grace set down the shirt. Lily's already decided you're not mean, just sad. And Samuel hasn't stopped talking about the fencing lesson. Even Ruth don't trust easy. She said you remind her of her daddy. Something flickered across Caleb's face. I don't know what to say to that. You don't have to say nothing. I just thought you should know. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The storm was coming. But for now, in this quiet house, with 7 sleeping children and 2 broken adults finding their way toward something neither could name, there was peace. I should sleep, Grace said finally. Morning comes early. It does. Caleb stood. Take the bedroom. I'll sleep out here. Mr. Stone, I can't. Caleb? She blinked. What? My name. It's Caleb. If you're gonna keep thanking me and arguing with me and making me remember things I tried to forget, you might as well use my name. Grace smiled. The first real smile she'd worn in months. All right, Caleb. She gathered her mending. Then you should call me Grace. Grace. He said it slowly, like he was tasting the word. That's a good name. My mama chose it. Said I came into the world screaming and she figured I'd need all the grace I could get. Smart woman. She was. Grace moved toward the bedroom door. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Grace. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her heart pounding. One day she'd told herself, maybe two. Now a storm was coming, and she might be here a week. And God help her, part of her was glad. The wind howled through the night, bringing the first flakes of snow. By morning, the world had turned white, and in Cedar Hollow, tongues were already wagging about the widow at Stone's place, the one who'd bewitched the coldest man in the territory. 3 days into the storm, the snow had buried everything. Grace stood at the window watching the white wall swirl beyond the glass. Somewhere out there was the road to town. Somewhere was the rest of the world. But right now, there was only this house, these children, and Caleb Stone. "Mama, I'm bored." Lily tugged at her skirt. Behind her, the other children sprawled across the main room in various states of restlessness. 3 days trapped inside had worn their patience thin. "I know, baby. Storm can't last forever. But I want to go outside." "You'd freeze in 2 minutes." "Would not." "Would too." Grace knelt to face her daughter. "Tell you what, why don't you help Ruth with the mending? She's got a whole pile waiting." "Mending's boring." "Boring keeps your hands busy." The door burst open. Caleb stumbled in, covered head to toe in snow, his face red from the cold. He slammed the door behind him and leaned against it, breathing hard. "Barn's secure," he said between gasps. "Animals are fed, but we lost 2 chickens. Froze overnight." Grace's heart sank. "I'm sorry." "Ain't your fault." He stamped snow off his boots. "Weather's nobody's fault." Samuel stepped forward. "Can I help with anything, Mr. Stone?" "Not in this mess. Wind'll knock you flat before you get 10 feet. "But—" "I said no." Caleb's voice was sharper than usual. He caught himself softened. "Storm should break by tomorrow. You can help then." Grace watched the exchange. Something was wrong. Caleb's eyes kept darting to the window, his jaw tight with more than cold. "Children," she said, "why don't you go play in the bedroom? Take turns telling stories." "But Mama," Daniel started. "Now, please." Something in her tone moved them. Even Lily didn't argue. They filed into the bedroom, Ruth carrying Hope Samuel, bringing up the rear with a worried glance over his shoulder. When the door closed, Grace turned to Caleb. "What happened out there?" "Nothing." "Don't lie to me. I can see it in your face." He pulled off his coat, hung it by the door. His movements were stiff, controlled. "Saw tracks," he said finally. "By the barn. Fresh ones." "Animal tracks. Boot prints." Grace felt ice spread through her chest. Someone was here in this storm. Someone was watching. From the tree line. Soon as I came out, they disappeared. Who would? I got a guess. Caleb moved to the window, peering out at the white wall. "Mrs. Hargrove's got a nephew. Works as a deputy. Name's Virgil. Mean little snake. Does her dirty work when she don't want her hands messy." "You think she sent him to spy on us?" "I think she's building a case." Caleb turned from the window. "Against you. Against me. She wants you gone, Grace. And if you won't leave on your own, she'll find a way to make you." Fear twisted in Grace's gut. "What kind of case?" "Could be anything. Improper conduct. Moral turpitude. Hell, she could claim I kidnapped you and the children. Wouldn't matter if it's true or not. She's got the mayor's ear and the sheriff's badge in her pocket. Then we should leave. Soon as the storm breaks. And go where?" Caleb's eyes met hers. "You got no money. No transportation. 7 children to feed. You wouldn't make it 20 miles before one of them got sick. Or worse. Then what do we do?" The question hung between them. Caleb's face was hard, but beneath it Grace saw something else. Something that looked almost like determination. "We give her nothing to find," he said. "I sleep in the barn from now on. You and the children stay in the house. No more late-night conversations. No more sitting by the fire together. Nothing she can twist into scandal." Grace's heart cracked. She hadn't realized how much those quiet evenings had come to mean. How much she'd looked forward to them. "Caleb, it's the only way." His voice was rough. "I ain't gonna let that woman destroy you, not when I can stop it." Before Grace could respond, a scream split the air. It came from the bedroom. Grace was through the door in seconds, Caleb right behind her. Hope lay on the floor, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead. Ruth knelt beside her, pressing a cloth to the wound, her face white with terror. "She fell," Ruth gasped. "Off the bed. Hit the corner of the nightstand. I tried to catch her, but I wasn't fast enough." "Move." Grace dropped to her knees, pulling Hope into her arms. The baby wailed, a sound so raw and primal, it cut through everything. "Let me see." Grace peeled back the cloth. The cut was deep, right at the hairline. Blood kept coming, soaking through the fabric. "We need to stop the bleeding," Caleb said. He was already moving, grabbing clean cloths from the dresser. "Press hard. Don't let up." Grace pressed. Hope screamed louder. The other children crowded around, their faces masks of fear. "Is she gonna die?" Thomas whispered. "No." Grace's voice was steel. "She's gonna be fine. It's just a cut. Heads bleed a lot. It looks worse than it is." She prayed she was telling the truth. Minutes passed. The bleeding slowed, finally stopped. Grace peeled back the cloth and examined the wound, deep but clean. It would scar, but it would heal. "She needs stitches," Caleb said quietly. "I know. Doc Morrison's in town, 5 miles. In this storm, we'd never make it." Then we wait. Caleb's jaw set. "Keep it clean. Change the bandage every few hours. Soon as the road's clear, we get her to the doc." Grace nodded, not trusting her voice. She cradled Hope against her chest, feeling the baby's heartbeat slow as the crying faded to whimpers. "I'm sorry, Mama." Ruth's voice was barely audible. "I should have been watching her better." "It wasn't your fault, sweetheart. But listen to me." Grace reached out, pulled Ruth close with her free arm. "Accidents happen. To everyone. What matters is how we handle them. And you did exactly right. You stayed calm. You got help. That's all anyone can do." Ruth buried her face in Grace's shoulder, silent tears soaking through the fabric. Caleb stood in the doorway watching. His face was unreadable, but his hands were shaking. "I'll get more bandages," he said, and disappeared. The night that followed was the longest of Grace's life. She didn't sleep, couldn't. Every hour she checked Hope's bandage, watched for signs of infection, listened to the baby's breathing. Caleb stayed in the barn as he'd promised. But twice Grace heard footsteps on the porch, heard him pause by the door, heard him walk away. He was keeping watch. By morning, the storm had broken. The sun rose on a world transformed, white and silent and impossibly bright, and Hope's fever had started. Grace felt it the moment she touched the baby's forehead, that terrible heat, that deadly warmth. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." "Mama." Samuel appeared in the doorway. "Is something wrong?" "Get Caleb, now." Samuel ran. Minutes later, Caleb burst through the door, his face wild. One look at Hope told him everything. "The cut's infected. I kept it clean. I changed the bandages. I did everything." "I know." Caleb was already pulling on his coat. "Ain't your fault. Some wounds just turned bad. I'm going for the doctor." "The roads are passable, barely, but I'll make it." "Caleb, if you get stuck out there, then I get stuck." He grabbed his hat, his gloves. "That baby ain't dying. Not in my house, not on my watch." He was gone before Grace could argue. The hours crawled. Grace held Hope, rocking her, singing the songs her own mother had sung. The baby's skin burned against her chest. Her breathing grew shallow, labored. The children gathered around, silent and scared. Even Lily understood that something terrible was happening. "Mama," she whispered, "is Hope gonna be an angel?" Grace's throat closed. "No, baby. She's gonna be fine. Mr. Stone went for the doctor." "But what if the doctor don't come?" "He'll come." "But what if—" "He'll come." Grace said it louder this time, as if saying it could make it true. The sun was setting when she heard hoofbeats. Grace ran to the door. Caleb was riding hard, a second figure on horseback behind him. They reached the house and dismounted in a flurry of snow. "Where's the child?" The doctor was an older man, gray-bearded, his bag clutched in weathered hands. "Here." Grace held Hope out. "The fever started this morning. The cut's infected. Please, you have to." "Let me work." He took the baby and moved to the table, already opening his bag. Grace watched as he examined the wound, his face grim. "It's bad," he said. "But I've seen worse. I need boiling water, clean cloths, and everyone out except the mother." The children scattered. Caleb hesitated at the door. "Stone." The doctor looked up. "You did good getting me here. Most men would have waited for safer roads." Waiting wasn't an option. Something passed between the two men. An understanding. A respect. Then Caleb was gone and the door closed and Grace was alone with her baby and the man who might save her. The next hours were a blur of fear and prayer. The doctor cleaned the wound, applied a poultice that smelled of herbs and alcohol, wrapped fresh bandages. He gave Hope something for the fever, a bitter liquid that made her cry, then sleep. "She'll make it," he said finally. "The infection's draining. Another day without treatment, and it would have been too late, but she'll make it." Grace collapsed into a chair. The tears she'd been holding back for hours, for days, for months, finally broke free. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you, thank you. Don't thank me." The doctor packed his bag. "Thank that stubborn fool who rode through 3-foot drifts to fetch me. Nearly killed his horse doing it." Grace wiped her eyes. "Caleb. Man's got a reputation in this town. Cold, unfriendly, keeps to himself." The doctor paused at the door. "But I've known him since he was a boy, since before his mama passed and his pa ran off. There's a good heart in there, just buried deep." "I know. Do you—" The doctor's eyes were sharp. "Because the way this town's talking, you'd think he was harboring criminals. Mrs. Hargrove's been busy. Very busy. What's she saying? Things I won't repeat to a lady." He pulled on his coat. "But I'll tell you this. That woman's got a grudge against the Stone family going back 20 years. Something about land. Something about pride. She won't stop until she's destroyed every last trace of them." "But Caleb hasn't done anything wrong." "Doesn't matter. In a town like Cedar Hollow, truth is whatever folks decide to believe. And right now, they're believing her." He left Grace with that warning and a bottle of medicine for Hope. She sat alone in the quiet kitchen, her sleeping baby in her arms, and felt the weight of everything pressing down. Caleb came in later, after the doctor had gone. His face was drawn, exhausted. He'd ridden 10 miles through deep snow, nearly killed his horse, all for a baby who wasn't his. "Doc says she'll be all right," Grace said. "I know, he told me." "Caleb." She stood, Hope cradled against her shoulder. "What you did today. Don't." "But I said don't." His voice cracked. I can't hear you thank me. Not for this. Because if I do, I might start believing I deserve it. And I don't." Grace stepped closer. "Why do you say that?" "Because I almost didn't let you in." The words poured out rough and raw. "That first day, when you came to my gate, I was going to turn you away, walk back to my house and forget you existed. And if the storm had caught you on the road? But you didn't. You let us stay. Only because you shamed me into it. You and that little girl of yours with her big eyes and her bare feet and her—" He stopped. His hands were shaking again. "Caleb, don't you see?" He looked at her, and Grace saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Not stone, not ice, but fear. Pure, naked fear. "I've spent 15 years building walls, keeping people out, telling myself I was better off alone. And then you show up, you and your 7 children, and everything I thought I knew just what? Falls apart." The silence stretched between them. Hope stirred, murmured, settled back to sleep. "I'm scared too," Grace whispered. "Every day, every hour. Scared I can't protect them. Scared I'll fail them. Scared I'll wake up one morning and find out I've lost everything all over again." "How do you keep going?" "Because they need me. Because giving up isn't an option. Because—" She paused, searching for the words. "Because sometimes in the middle of all that fear there's something else. Something that feels like hope. And I hold on to it with everything I've got. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts." Caleb reached out. His hand hovered near her face, trembling, uncertain. Then it dropped. "I should check on the horses," he said. "Caleb, get some rest, Grace. You've been up all night." He was gone before she could stop him. The next morning brought a visitor. Grace was feeding Hope when the knock came. Hard, demanding. Nothing like Caleb's quiet rap. She opened the door. Ruth Hargrove stood on the porch wrapped in black fur, her face pinched with cold and triumph. "Mrs. Wheeler." The name dripped like poison. "How lovely to find you still here. I'd hoped the storm might have encouraged you to move on." "Storm's barely cleared, ma'am. Roads are still dangerous." "And yet Dr. Morrison made it just fine. Curious, isn't it, how some people find reasons to stay when they should be going?" Grace's hands tightened on the doorframe. "Is there something you want, Mrs. Hargrove?" "Just a friendly warning." The older woman smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "My nephew Virgil, you may have seen him around. He's been keeping an eye on things, making notes, gathering evidence." "Evidence of what?" "Of improper conduct, Mrs. Wheeler. Of moral corruption. Of a widow using her children to worm her way into a man's home and his affections. That's not what's happening here. Isn't it?" Mrs. Hargrove stepped closer. "Let me tell you what I see. I see a woman who arrived penniless and desperate. I see a man who's never shown interest in any woman suddenly opening his doors. I see late nights together, shared meals, a convenient storm that kept you trapped here for days. We've done nothing wrong. Then you won't mind when I bring this to the town council, when I demand an investigation, when I make sure everyone in Cedar Hollow knows exactly what kind of woman has been living under Caleb Stone's roof." Grace felt the blood drain from her face. "You'd destroy us. For what? What have we ever done to you?" "Nothing. But his mother did." Mrs. Hargrove's eyes glittered with old hatred. 20 years ago, Eliza Stone had the nerve to reject my brother's proposal. Said she'd rather die than marry into our family. 6 months later, she was dead anyway, worked to death by that drunk she chose instead. Some women get what they deserve. And you've been waiting all this time to hurt her son. I've been waiting for the right opportunity. The smile widened. And you've given it to me. A scandal involving Caleb Stone and a vagrant widow, the town will eat it alive. He'll lose everything, his reputation, his standing, maybe even his land. And I'll finally have justice for the insult his mother dealt my family. That's madness. That's patience, Mrs. Wheeler. Something you should have learned before you showed up begging at his door." She turned to go. "Mrs. Hargrove." The older woman paused. "I don't know what hurt you so bad that you need to destroy innocent people to feel better," Grace said. "But I know this. Whatever you take from us, whatever you cost Caleb, it won't fill that hole inside you. It'll just make it bigger." Ruth Hargrove's face twisted. "Enjoy your last days here, Mrs. Wheeler. They won't be many." She swept away, her fur coat trailing behind her like a shadow. Grace closed the door. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. She had to warn Caleb. She found him in the barn brushing down his horse. The animal looked exhausted, still recovering from yesterday's desperate ride. "We have a problem," Grace said. He didn't look up. "I know. Saw her coming up the road." "Then you know what she's planning." "Got a fair idea. Caleb, we have to do something. She's going to destroy you. Let her try. This isn't a joke. Do I look like I'm joking?" He finally turned to face her. His expression was calm. Too calm. I've been living under that woman's shadow my whole life, watching her poison this town against my family, listening to her lies about my mother. Then why haven't you fought back? Because fighting back meant caring, and caring meant opening myself up to getting hurt. So I just... He shrugged. Stopped. Stopped fighting. Stopped caring. Stopped everything. And now... Caleb set down the brush, walked toward her, stopped close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. Now I got something worth fighting for. Grace's breath caught. Caleb, I ain't saying it right. I know I ain't. But when I rode through that storm yesterday, when I thought about Hope dying, about you losing another person you love, something changed in me. He swallowed. I don't want to be alone anymore, Grace. I don't want to spend the rest of my life building walls and pushing people away. I want... What do you want? He looked at her like she was the sunrise after the longest night. I want this. You. The children. A family. Something real. Something worth protecting. Grace's eyes burned. We've only known each other a week. I know. People will talk. They already are. Mrs. Hargrove will make our lives impossible. Probably. This is crazy. Probably that too. Grace laughed. It came out wet, broken, completely unexpected. You're asking me to stay. After everything. After all the trouble we've brought you. I'm asking you to let me try. Caleb reached for her hand. His palm was rough, calloused, warm. I ain't got pretty words. I ain't got a fancy house or a big name or any of the things you deserve. But I've got this land, and I've got whatever's left of my heart. And if you'll have them, they're yours. Grace looked down at their joined hands, at the dirt under his nails, at the scars on his knuckles. She thought about Oregon, about her sister, about the 1,000 miles still between her and safety. Then she thought about Caleb riding through the storm, about his mother's stew, about the way he looked at Lily when she called him not mean, just sad. The children, she said, this has to be their choice too. I know. And if they say no, then I help you get to Oregon, soon as the road's clear. No questions, no arguments. Grace squeezed his hand. Let's go ask them. They walked back to the house together, side by side. The children were waiting, all 7 of them lined up in the main room like soldiers awaiting inspection. Samuel at one end. Hope awake now, her fever broken, cradled in Ruth's arms at the other. Mr. Stone has something to ask you, Grace said. Something important, and I want you to answer honestly. Whatever you feel is the right answer, that's what you say. Understand? 7 heads nodded. Caleb cleared his throat. He looked more nervous than Grace had ever seen him. I ain't good at speeches, he began, and I ain't got a lot of practice talking to children. But your mama, she's a good woman, the best I've ever known. And you've turned this house into something it ain't been in a long time. A home. He paused, swallowed. I'm asking if you'd stay, all of you, not as guests, but as family. I'm asking if you'd let me be, if you'd give me a chance to be a daddy. Lily's voice was small, hopeful. Caleb's face crumpled, just for a second. Then it steadied. Yeah, little one. Something like that. Silence. Then Samuel stepped forward, 12 years old, almost a man, the weight of the family on his thin shoulders. You'd take care of them, he asked. All of them, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And Mama, you'd be good to her. Best I know how. Samuel turned to his siblings. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then he looked back at Caleb. My daddy used to say you can tell a man's character by how he treats folks who can't do nothing for him. We couldn't do nothing for you, Mr. Stone. We were just strangers begging at your gate. But you let us in anyway, fed us, sheltered us, risked your life for Hope. His voice cracked. I think Daddy would have liked you. I think he would have been glad Mama found someone like you. He held out his hand. Caleb took it. And just like that, the wall came down. Word traveled fast in Cedar Hollow. By the time the sun set on the day Samuel shook Caleb's hand, half the town already knew. The widow was staying. The Stone Ranch would have children running through its fields. The coldest man in the territory had finally melted, and Ruth Hargrove was furious. Grace learned of the woman's rage 3 days later when she made her first trip to town. Caleb had argued against it, warned her the reception would be hostile, but Grace refused to hide. If we're going to make a life here, she said, I need to face them, all of them. Hiding just makes us look guilty. You ain't got nothing to be guilty about. I know that, but they don't, and they won't unless I show them. So she went, alone, head high. 7 children watching from the porch as the wagon disappeared down the road. The general store fell silent when she walked in. Every eye turned. Every conversation stopped. Grace felt the weight of their stares like stones pressing against her chest. She walked to the counter anyway. Morning, she said to the shopkeeper, a thin man with spectacles and nervous hands. I need flour, sugar, some salt pork if you've got it. He didn't move. Mr. Hendricks, did you hear me? I heard you. His voice was tight. I just ain't sure I want to serve you. Why not? You know why. Grace planted her hands on the counter. No, sir, I don't. So why don't you tell me plain? The silence deepened. Behind her, Grace could feel the other customers watching, waiting. Mrs. Hargrove says you're trouble, Hendricks finally said. Says you showed up begging and wormed your way into Stone's place. Says you're... He stopped, his face reddening. Says I'm what? Says you ain't a decent woman. Grace felt the words like a slap, but she didn't flinch. Mrs. Hargrove, she said slowly, has never spoken 2 words to me. She don't know where I came from. She don't know what I've been through. She don't know nothing about me except that I'm poor, and I got children, and I had the nerve to ask for help when I needed it. That ain't... I buried my husband 2 years ago. Grace's voice rose, carrying to every corner of the store. Watched him die of fever while I held his hand. Watched his family throw us out like garbage because they didn't want to feed us. Walked 18 miles with 7 children, one of them barely 2 years old because I had nowhere else to go. She leaned closer to Hendricks. And when I got to Caleb Stone's gate, I didn't beg for charity. I offered to work, to sweep his barn, to earn our keep. That's what Mrs. Hargrove calls indecent. That's what you're refusing to serve. Hendricks swallowed. His eyes darted around the store looking for support, finding none. I didn't know. No, you didn't. Because you didn't ask. You just believed what that woman told you. She's the mayor's wife. I don't care if she's the Queen of England. A lie is a lie no matter who tells it. A voice came from behind her. Well said. Grace turned. An older woman stood near the door, gray-haired and sturdy, with the kind of face that had seen hard times and come through stronger. She wore a simple dress, practical boots, and an expression of quiet approval. Name's Martha, the woman said. Martha Dawson, sheriff's wife. Mrs. Dawson. Grace nodded cautiously. I remember your husband from when we first arrived. He mentioned meeting you. Martha stepped closer. Also mentioned that Caleb Stone looked at you different than he's looked at anybody in 15 years. I don't know what that means. It means you woke something up in him, something this town thought was dead. Martha turned to Hendricks. George, fill this woman's order and put it on my account. Martha, I can't. You can, and you will, unless you want me telling my husband about those special shipments you've been getting from St. Louis. Hendricks went pale. Without another word, he began gathering Grace's supplies. Martha took Grace's arm and led her toward the door. Don't let the old bats get to you, she said quietly. Half of them are just jealous. The other half are scared. Scared of what? Of change. Of anything different. Ruth Hargrove's been running this town like her personal kingdom for 20 years. She decides who's respectable and who's not, who gets invited to parties and who gets shunned. And I'm a threat to that. Honey, you're the biggest threat she's ever seen. Martha's eyes twinkled. A widow who won't be shamed, a mother who won't give up, a woman who looked Caleb Stone in the eye and made him feel something. That scares the hell out of her. Why? Because if you can do all that, maybe the rest of us can too. Maybe we don't need her permission to live our lives. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Mrs. Dawson. Martha, and don't thank me yet. Ruth's not done, not by a long shot. She was right. The summons came 2 days later. A formal letter hand-delivered by Virgil Hargrove himself. He stood on Caleb's porch with a smirk on his face and a document in his hand. Town council meeting, he announced. Tomorrow at noon. Your presence is required. Caleb took the letter, read it. His face went hard as granite. What are the charges? No charges, just questions. The council wants to understand the situation here. The situation is none of their business. Everything in Cedar Hollow is the council's business, Stone. You know that. Virgil's eyes slid to Grace, who stood behind Caleb with Lily clutching her skirt. Especially when it involves moral matters. Get off my land. I'm going, but you better show up tomorrow, both of you, unless you want the council making decisions without your input. He rode away, leaving dust and dread in his wake. That night, Grace and Caleb sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the letter between them. You don't have to come, Caleb said. Yes, I do. They'll tear you apart. Ask questions about your past, your marriage, your reasons for coming here. I know. They'll try to humiliate you. They can try. Grace picked up the letter, read it again. But I've survived worse than small-town gossip, Caleb. I've survived hunger, cold, grief. I've survived watching my children cry themselves to sleep because I couldn't give them food. She set the letter down. Ruth Hargrove thinks she can break me with whispers and council meetings. Let her try. I've got nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of. Caleb reached across the table, took her hand. I don't deserve you. Probably not. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. But you're stuck with me anyway. The town hall was packed. Every seat filled. Every wall lined with standing bodies. Grace had never seen so many people in one place since she'd arrived in Cedar Hollow. They were all staring at her. She walked in with Caleb at her side and 7 children trailing behind. Samuel had insisted on coming. So had Ruth, Mary, and Daniel. Even Lily had refused to stay home. We're a family, Samuel had said that morning. Families stick together. Grace had never been prouder. The council sat at a long table at the front of the room. 5 men, all older, all grim-faced. The mayor, Ruth Hargrove's husband, sat in the center, his face carefully blank. Ruth herself sat in the front row, dressed in her finest black silk, her expression radiating triumph. Mrs. Wheeler. The mayor's voice was heavy. Mr. Stone, thank you for coming. Didn't realize we had a choice, Caleb said. You always have choices, Mr. Stone. Some are just wiser than others. He shuffled papers, cleared his throat. We've called this meeting to address concerns raised by several citizens regarding the living arrangements at the Stone Ranch, specifically the presence of a widow and her children in a household occupied by an unmarried man. What's the concern? Grace asked. We've done nothing wrong. Perhaps, but the appearance of impropriety can be as damaging as impropriety itself. This is a God-fearing community, Mrs. Wheeler. We have standards. Standards that apply to everyone, or just to widows and orphans. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The mayor's eyes narrowed. We're not here to debate philosophy. We're here to establish facts. He turned to Ruth Hargrove. Mrs. Hargrove, you submitted the original complaint. Please present your evidence. Ruth rose with the grace of a snake uncoiling. Thank you, Mayor. As many of you know, I've had concerns about this situation from the beginning. A strange woman appearing from nowhere, begging at the gate of a respectable landowner, using her children as props to gain sympathy. That's not true, Grace said. Please, Mrs. Wheeler, you'll have your turn. Ruth smiled coldly. Since then, I've gathered testimony from witnesses. Mr. Hendricks at the general store reports that Mrs. Wheeler became aggressive when questioned about her circumstances. Deputy Virgil observed late-night activities at the Stone Ranch lights, burning figures moving about at improper hours. Improper hours. Caleb's voice was sharp. We had a sick child. Hope nearly died from an infected wound. Doc Morrison was there. He can confirm. Oh, I don't doubt there was a medical situation. Ruth's tone dripped false concern. But it does seem convenient, doesn't it? A crisis that required even more intimate contact. More reason to stay. More opportunity to... Enough. The word came from the back of the room. Everyone turned. Dr. Morrison stood in the doorway, his face flushed with anger. I've heard enough of this nonsense, he said, pushing through the crowd to the front. I was at that house, Ruth. I saw exactly what was happening. And I'll tell you what I saw, a mother terrified for her child's life. A man who nearly killed his horse riding through a blizzard to fetch help. And 7 children who've been through more hardship than most adults in this room could imagine. Doctor, please, the mayor started. No, George, I've kept quiet long enough. This town has let Ruth Hargrove poison it for 20 years. I watched her drive good families away with her gossip and her grudges. I watched her destroy your own sister's reputation because she dared to speak against the mayor's policies. That's not... It is. We all know it is. We're just too scared to say it. He turned to face the crowd. Caleb Stone's mother was my patient. I was there when she died. Worked to the bone by an abusive husband, abandoned by a town that should have helped her. And do you know who started the rumors that kept people from lending a hand? Ruth Hargrove. Because Eliza Stone had the audacity to refuse her brother's proposal. Gasps rippled through the room. Ruth's face went white. That's ancient history. History repeats, Ruth. And you're proving it right now. Going after this woman and her children because you can't let go of a 20-year grudge. He pointed at Grace. Look at her. Really look. Does she look like a fortune hunter? Does she look like someone trying to trap a man? She looks like what she is, a mother, a survivor, a woman who's been knocked down by life more times than any of us, and keeps getting back up. Silence fell over the hall. Then Martha Dawson stood. The doctor's right. I've watched this whole spectacle unfold, and I'm ashamed. Ashamed that we'd put a mother and her children on trial for the crime of being poor. Ashamed that we'd let one woman's bitterness dictate how we treat strangers. Another voice joined in. The blacksmith's wife. I've talked to those children, sweetest kids I've ever met. The older boy Samuel helped my husband fix a wagon wheel last week. Wouldn't take a penny for it. More voices. The school teacher. The woman from the bakery. One by one they stood and spoke. For Grace. For her children. For the chance she deserved. Ruth Hargrove watched her carefully constructed case crumble. Her face contorted with fury. You're all fools, she spat. Taken in by a pretty face and a sob story. When she bleeds him dry and moves on to the next mark, don't say I didn't warn you. That's enough, Ruth. The mayor's voice was quiet. Tired. Sit down. George? I said sit down. For a moment Ruth looked like she might refuse. Then slowly she sank into her chair. The mayor turned to Grace. Mrs. Wheeler, on behalf of this council and this town, I apologize. You came here seeking shelter and kindness. Instead you found suspicion and cruelty. That's not who we should be. Grace's throat tightened. Thank you. Mr. Stone. The mayor's eyes shifted to Caleb. Your intentions toward this woman and her children. What are they? Caleb stood. For a long moment he was silent, looking out at the crowd that had judged him his whole life. Then he spoke. My intentions are to marry her, make her my wife, adopt her children as my own, give them the family they deserve." The room erupted. Questions, congratulations. A few scattered protests drowned out by louder voices of support. Through it all, Grace stood frozen. Caleb hadn't told her he was going to say that. Hadn't warned her. He turned to her, now his gray eyes uncertain for the first time since she'd known him. "That is," he said quietly, "if she'll have me." "In front of everyone," Grace whispered. "You're proposing in front of everyone." Seemed like the moment. "You're crazy." "Probably." Grace looked at her children, at Samuel's proud smile, at Ruth and Mary clutching each other, at Lily bouncing on her toes with barely contained excitement, at Daniel and Thomas wide-eyed and hopeful, at Hope in Ruth's arms reaching toward Caleb with chubby fingers. She looked at the man who'd taken them in when no one else would, who'd risked his horse, his reputation, his heart. "Yes," she said. The word was barely a whisper, but Caleb heard it. His face transformed the stone, cracking the ice, melting something soft and vulnerable emerging from beneath. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll be your wife, and my children will be your children." He pulled her close. Not a kiss. Not yet. Not here. Not with the whole town watching, but an embrace. Strong arms around her. A heartbeat against her cheek. "I love you," he said against her hair. "Don't know when it happened. Don't know how. But I do. I love you too." The words came easier than she'd expected. "God help me, I love you too." Around them the town erupted in celebration, all except Ruth Hargrove, who sat in her chair watching with eyes like burning coals. This wasn't over. Not for her. The next days passed in a blur of preparations. The wedding was set for the following Sunday, quick by some standards, but no one questioned it. After everything that had happened, the town seemed eager to make amends. Women who'd avoided Grace's eyes now stopped her on the street to offer congratulations. Men who'd whispered behind Caleb's back now shook his hand and clapped his shoulder. Even Sheriff Dawson, who'd kept his distance during the controversy, came by the ranch to offer his blessing. "You've done good, Stone," he said. "Your mama would be proud." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Wish she could be here." Maybe she is, in her own way. The night before the wedding, Grace sat on the porch watching the stars. The children were asleep. Caleb was in the barn doing final checks on the animals. She should have been happy. Was happy in a way that felt foreign after so many years of struggle. But something nagged at her. A feeling she couldn't name. A shadow at the edge of her joy. Footsteps on the porch. She looked up expecting Caleb. It was Virgil Hargrove. He stood at the edge of the steps, his deputy's badge glinting in the starlight, his face twisted with something that might have been hatred or hunger. "Evening, Mrs. Wheeler." Grace rose slowly. "Deputy, it's late." "It is. I won't take much of your time." He stepped closer. "My aunt wanted me to deliver a message." "I don't want to hear anything from your aunt." "Hear it anyway." Another step. "She says to enjoy your wedding day. Enjoy your new life, because it won't last." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. See, my aunt's been digging. Into your past, into your dead husband's debts. And she's found something interesting." Grace felt ice spread through her veins. "What are you talking about?" "Your husband borrowed money before he died, quite a lot of it, from a man in Kansas City, a man who's been looking for you. Thomas paid his debts. Not this one, not even close." Virgil's smile was ugly. "The collector's name is Amos Blackwood. Ring a bell." Grace's blood ran cold. Amos Blackwood. The name she'd run from. The reason she'd kept moving, kept hiding, kept looking over her shoulder, even when she thought she was safe. "I see it does." Virgil laughed. "Aunt Ruth reached out to him, told him where you were. He's on his way here right now, Should arrive any day. You can't, that man is dangerous? Not my problem. He tipped his hat. Enjoy your wedding, Mrs. Wheeler, while you can. He disappeared into the darkness. Grace stood frozen, her hands shaking, her heart pounding. Amos Blackwood, coming here, coming for her. And there was nowhere left to run. Grace didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window until dawn, watching the road, waiting for the devil she'd thought she'd outrun. Amos Blackwood. The name alone made her skin crawl. Thomas had borrowed money from him 3 years ago when the farm was failing and the children were hungry. $1,000. Enough to save them. Enough to destroy them. Thomas had paid back half before the fever took him. The other half remained. And Amos Blackwood wasn't the kind of man who forgave debts. Grace. She turned. Caleb stood in the doorway, his hair mussed from sleep, his eyes sharp with concern. You didn't come to bed. Couldn't sleep. Something's wrong. He crossed to her, knelt beside her chair. Tell me. Grace looked at this man who'd given her everything, who'd opened his home, his heart, his future, who was supposed to marry her in 6 hours. I have to tell you something, she said, and when I'm done, you might not want to marry me anymore. Caleb's face didn't change. Try me. So she told him. Everything. The debt, Amos Blackwood, the threats that had followed her from Kansas. The reason she'd kept running, kept moving, never stayed anywhere long enough to be found. He's coming here, she finished. Virgil told me last night. Ruth Hargrove sent for him. He could arrive any day. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. His jaw worked. His hands resting on his knees curled into fists. How much? He finally asked. $500, plus interest. Could be $600 by now, maybe more. I've got $400 saved. Could sell some livestock for the rest. Grace stared at him. You'd do that, pay off my dead husband's debt. Our debt now. His eyes met hers. That's what marriage means, Grace. Your problems become mine. Your enemies become mine. Your past becomes mine. Caleb. Did you think I'd walk away after everything? Because some loan shark is coming to collect? Most men would. I ain't most men. He stood, pulling her up with him. We'll face him together. Whatever he wants, whatever he threatens, we face it together. That's the deal. Grace felt tears spill down her cheeks. I don't deserve you. Probably not. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But you're stuck with me anyway. The wedding was set for noon at the small church on the edge of town. Grace, dressed in her best dress, a blue cotton that had seen better days, but was clean and pressed. Martha Dawson had woven wildflowers into a crown for her hair. Ruth had helped with the buttons. Mary had polished her boots until they shone. You look beautiful, Mama, Lily said, her eyes wide. Thank you, baby. Are you scared? Grace thought about the question. About Amos Blackwood somewhere on the road. About Ruth Hargrove's hatred. About all the things that could still go wrong. A little, she admitted. Mr. Caleb, I mean Papa, he'll protect us. Right, Papa. The word hit Grace like a punch to the chest. Yeah, baby, he will. The church was fuller than Grace expected. Half the town had come, some out of genuine goodwill, others out of curiosity. She saw Martha Dawson in the front row, dabbing at her eyes. Dr. Morrison stood near the back, arms crossed, a satisfied smile on his weathered face. Ruth Hargrove was nowhere to be seen. Caleb waited at the altar, dressed in a clean shirt and his best pants. He'd shaved, combed his hair. He looked almost like a different man. No, not different. The same man, Grace realized, just no longer hiding. The ceremony was simple, traditional vows. A ring that had belonged to Caleb's mother, plain silver, worn smooth with time. With this ring I thee wed. His voice cracked on the words, just slightly, just enough for Grace to know how much this meant to him. With this ring I thee wed, she repeated. And it was done. They were married. The celebration afterward was modest but warm. Food and drink at the town hall. Music from a fiddle player. Children running between the adults, their laughter echoing off the walls. Grace watched her children. Caleb's children now, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real hope. Not the desperate kind that kept you moving when everything hurt, but the quiet kind. The kind that whispered, maybe, just maybe, things would be all right. Then the doors burst open. He stood in the entrance like a shadow given form. Tall, gaunt, dressed in black from head to toe. A scar ran down his left cheek, puckered and white against his weathered skin. Amos Blackwood had arrived. The music stopped. Conversations died. Every eye turned to the stranger in the doorway. Well, well. His voice was like gravel scraping bone. Looks like I'm just in time for the party. Caleb stepped forward, putting himself between Blackwood and Grace. You weren't invited. Didn't need an invitation. I got business here. Blackwood's eyes found Grace. Hello, Mrs. Wheeler. Or should I say Mrs. Stone. Now congratulations on your nuptials. What do you want? Grace's voice came out steadier than she felt. What I've always wanted. What's owed to me. He pulled a paper from his coat. $500 borrowed by Thomas Wheeler, deceased. Plus 2 years of interest at 15%. Comes to $723. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. That's more than a man earns in a year, someone whispered. Can't pay what you don't have, another muttered. Blackwood smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Can't pay in money, maybe. But there's other ways to settle a debt. Such as... Caleb's voice was ice. Such as labor. Such as... services. His gaze crawled over Grace in a way that made her skin feel dirty. A widow with her looks could earn back that debt in no time. I know some establishments in Kansas City that would pay good money for... Caleb moved. 1 second he was standing in front of Grace. The next, his fist connected with Blackwood's jaw. The debt collector staggered back, crashing into the doorframe. You don't talk about my wife like that. Caleb's voice was low, dangerous. Ever. Blackwood wiped blood from his lip. Instead of anger, his face showed something worse. Amusement. Protective. I like that. But it don't change the facts, Stone. She owes me money. Money she can't pay. Which means she's mine until the debt is cleared. She's not yours. She's not anybody's. She's a free woman. Not according to the law. Blackwood straightened, producing another paper. This here's a court order from Kansas. Says Grace Wheeler defaulted on a legal debt. Says I'm entitled to collect by any means necessary. He grinned. Including taking possession of her person. The room erupted. Shouts. Protests. Someone called for the sheriff. Grace felt the world spinning around her, her worst nightmare coming true in front of everyone she'd come to care about. That order ain't valid in Wyoming, a voice cut through the chaos. Sheriff Dawson pushed through the crowd, his badge gleaming. Kansas law don't apply here, Blackwood. You got no authority in my territory. The law is the law, Sheriff. Debt follows the debtor. Not in my town, it don't. Dawson squared up to Blackwood. You want to collect, you file a claim with our courts. Go through proper channels. But you ain't taking nobody anywhere tonight. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. This isn't over. Maybe not. But for tonight, it is. Get out of my town. Come back when you've got paperwork that means something. For a long moment, Blackwood didn't move. His eyes swept the room, landing on Grace, on Caleb, on the crowd of townspeople who'd gathered around them. All right, Sheriff. I'll play it your way, for now. He tipped his hat mockingly toward Grace. See you soon, Mrs. Stone. Real soon. He walked out. The doors swung shut behind him. Grace's legs gave out. Caleb caught her before she hit the floor. He held her against his chest, his heart pounding against her ear. It's okay, he murmured. I've got you. I've got you. He'll come back, Grace whispered. He always comes back. Let him. We'll be ready. The celebration was over. People drifted away in twos and threes, their faces troubled, their congratulations hollow. Whatever joy the wedding had brought was gone now, replaced by the shadow Amos Blackwood had cast. That night, Grace sat with Caleb at the kitchen table, the children finally asleep in their beds. $700, she said. We can't raise that, not without selling everything. Then we sell everything. The ranch, your land. Everything you've worked for. It's just land, Grace. Just buildings and dirt. You and those children, that's what matters. I can't ask you to do that. You ain't asking, I'm offering. He reached across the table, took her hands. When I married you today, I meant every word. For richer, for poorer. In sickness and in health. This is the for poorer part, and I don't care. Grace squeezed his hands. There has to be another way. Maybe there is. Caleb's jaw set. Dawson said Blackwood's papers don't mean nothing here. If we can prove the debt was paid, or that it wasn't legal in the first place. Thomas signed the papers himself. I saw them. Did you read them? Grace paused. No. Thomas handled all the business matters. So you don't know what he actually agreed to. Could be Blackwood added terms after the fact. Could be the interest rate's illegal. Could be 100 things wrong with that contract. Hope flickered in Grace's chest. How would we prove it? We'd need a lawyer, someone who knows debt law. We can't afford a lawyer. Maybe we don't have to pay. Caleb stood pacing the small kitchen. There's a man in Cheyenne, used to work with my pa before the drinking got bad. Helped me keep this land when the bank tried to take it. Name's Henry Aldridge. He owes me a favor. You think he'd help? Only one way to find out. Caleb left for Cheyenne at dawn. Grace watched him ride away, her heart torn between hope and terror. Every hour he was gone was an hour Blackwood could return. An hour she'd have to face the devil alone. She kept the children close, kept the doors locked, kept the rifle Caleb had left her within arm's reach. Samuel noticed. Mama, what's wrong? Who was that man at the wedding? Someone from the past, Sam. Someone who wants something we can't give. Is he going to hurt us? Grace looked at her oldest son, 12 years old, trying so hard to be a man, and felt her heart break. Not if I can help it. I can protect us. I'm strong enough. Papa Caleb's been teaching me. I know, baby, but this isn't your fight. It's our family. That makes it my fight too. Grace pulled him close. When did you get so brave? When I had to. The day stretched long and tense. Grace jumped at every sound, every creak of the floorboards, every whistle of wind, every distant hoofbeat. Lily stayed close to her skirts. Ruth kept the younger children occupied with games. Even Hope seemed to sense the tension, fussing more than usual. Sunset came. No Caleb, no word. Grace put the children to bed, then sat by the window with the rifle across her lap, waiting. The knock came at midnight. Grace's heart stopped. She raised the rifle, aimed it at the door. Who's there? It's me, Caleb's voice. Open up. She threw open the door. He stood on the porch, travel-worn and exhausted, but his eyes were bright. Did you find him, the lawyer? Found him. Caleb stepped inside, closed the door behind him. And Grace, you're not going to believe what he told me. What? Thomas's debt. The papers Blackwood's holding. They're forgeries. The world tilted. What? Henry looked into it. The original loan was for $300. Thomas paid it off, all of it, 6 months before he died. There's a receipt on file in Kansas City. Then how? Blackwood forged new papers after Thomas passed, changed the amount, added interest that was never part of the deal. He's been doing it for years, targeting widows, women who can't fight back. Grace sank into a chair. So we don't owe him anything? Not a cent. And the court order? Fake. The whole thing's fake. Henry's already sent word to the Kansas authorities. Blackwood's got warrants out for his arrest in 3 states. Caleb knelt beside her. It's over, Grace. It's finally over. She couldn't speak, couldn't process. For 2 years, she'd run from this nightmare. For 2 years, she'd looked over her shoulder, waited for the shadow to catch up. And now it was gone. There's more, Caleb said. Henry found records of other women Blackwood's done this to. Some of them paid. Some of them, he paused. Some of them didn't survive. He killed them, sold them, to those establishments in Kansas City he mentioned, women who had no one to protect them, no one to fight for them. Grace felt sick. That could have been her, if she hadn't stopped at Caleb's gate, if he hadn't let her in. Where is he now, Blackwood? That's the thing. Caleb's face hardened. He's still here, in Cedar Hollow, staying at the saloon, probably planning his next move. He doesn't know you found the truth. Not yet. Grace looked at her husband, saw the determination in his eyes, the cold, quiet fury. What are you going to do? What needs to be done? Caleb rode into town at dawn, Grace at his side. She'd refused to stay home. If this was the end, if they were finally going to face Blackwood, she wanted to be there, needed to be there. Sheriff Dawson met them at the edge of town, Henry Aldridge's telegram in his hand. Got word from Cheyenne, he said. Kansas wants this man bad. Armed robbery, fraud, assault. 3 counts of... He stopped, glanced at Grace. Well, bad stuff. Where is he? Still at the saloon. Been there all night drinking and bragging about the widow he's about to collect. Not anymore, Caleb said. They found Blackwood at a corner table, a bottle of whiskey in front of him, a smug smile on his scarred face. Well, if it isn't the happy couple. Come to negotiate. Come to arrest you, Sheriff Dawson said, stepping forward. Amos Blackwood, you're wanted in Kansas for fraud, forgery, and crimes against women. You're under arrest. Blackwood's smile faltered. On what evidence? On plenty. Your whole scheme's been exposed. The fake papers, the forged debts, the women you sold. Dawson's voice was iron. It's over. For a moment, Blackwood sat frozen. Then his hand moved toward his belt. Don't. Caleb's voice was quiet, deadly. You reach for that gun, I'll put you down before you clear leather. Blackwood looked at Caleb, at the rifle in his hands, at the cold certainty in his eyes. His hand moved away from his belt. This ain't finished, he growled as Dawson cuffed him. Yeah, it is. Grace stepped forward, looking the man who'd haunted her nightmares straight in the eye. You tried to destroy me, tried to take everything I had, but you failed, and now you're going to prison for a very long time. You think you've won women like you don't win. You survive, you endure, but you don't win. Grace smiled. It was the first real smile she'd worn since hearing his name. Watch me. They dragged him away. Grace watched until he disappeared into the jailhouse, until the doors closed behind him, until she was sure, absolutely sure he was gone. Then she turned to Caleb. It's over, she whispered. It's over, he confirmed. And for the first time in 2 years, Grace Wheeler, no Grace Stone, breathed free. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Grace's life. Spring came to Cedar Hollow, melting the last of the snow, painting the hills green and gold. The children thrived, growing stronger and louder with each passing day. Samuel started working the ranch alongside Caleb, learning to rope and ride. Ruth took over the hen house, increasing egg production by half. Mary and Daniel attended the schoolhouse in town, making friends, catching up on the education they'd missed. Thomas Young. Thomas, named for his father, followed Caleb everywhere, mimicking his walk, his stance, his quiet way of watching the world. Lily had stopped asking when they were going to Oregon. And Hope, now nearly 3, had started calling Caleb Papa without prompting. The town, too, had changed. Ruth Hargrove had retreated from public life after her nephew's arrest for conspiracy. The mayor, humiliated by his wife's schemes, had resigned his position. In his place, the town had elected Sheriff Dawson, a man known for fairness, for integrity, for treating everyone the same regardless of where they came from. Grace still got looks sometimes from the few who clung to old prejudices. But they were fewer now, quieter, outnumbered by the smiles, the waves, the invitations to Sunday dinners and quilting circles. She belonged here. They all did. On a warm evening in late May, Grace sat on the porch with Caleb, watching the sun set over their land. The children's voices drifted from inside, laughter, argument, the everyday chaos of family. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked. Grace considered the question. "I'm thinking about the day I showed up at your gate, knees in the mud, begging for shelter. Wasn't my finest moment. Wasn't mine either." She leaned against his shoulder. "But look where it led us." "Yeah." His arm wrapped around her. "Look where it led." Silence settled between them, comfortable and warm. Caleb. "Thank you for letting us in, for giving us a chance, for—" She paused, searching for the words. "For being the man you didn't think you could be." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I spent 15 years building walls, keeping people out, telling myself I was safer alone." He turned to look at her. "Then you showed up. You and 7 hungry children, and you tore those walls down in a week. I didn't mean to. I know. That's what made it real." He cupped her face in his calloused hands. "I love you, Grace Stone. I love your strength, your stubbornness, your refusal to give up, even when everything's against you. I love those children like they're my own blood. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life being grateful you knocked on my door." Grace felt tears slide down her cheeks. "I love you too. More than I ever thought I could love anyone again." He kissed her, then soft and slow, as the last light faded from the sky. Inside, Lily's voice rose above the others. "Mama Thomas stole my biscuit. Did not? Did too." Grace laughed against Caleb's lips. "Duty calls." "Always does." They stood together hand in hand and walked inside to settle the latest dispute among their 7 children. Their family. Their home. Their second chance at everything that mattered. And Grace Wheeler Stone, who had once knelt in the mud begging for shelter, knew with absolute certainty that she would never beg again. She had found her place in this world. She had found her home. She had found love where she least expected it, in the heart of a stone-cold rancher who turned out to be anything but. And that was enough. That was everything. The dust road that had led her to Caleb Stone's gate now stretched behind her, a memory of hardship transformed into hope. Ahead lay a future she'd stopped believing was possible, a future of warmth, of laughter, of children growing tall and strong under Wyoming skies. Some stories end with castles and crowns. Hers ended with a ranch house, a loving husband, and 7 children who'd finally stopped running. It was Grace decided the best kind of ending. The only kind that really mattered.